Welcome to Keep You 100 Radio. I'm your host, Lissy Pointer, type 1 diabetic, certified health coach, personal trainer, and founder of Needles and Spoons Health and Wellness. Inside this podcast, you'll find the real and raw conversations around diabetes management, including the lessons that we don't learn in our endo's office, my best tips and trainings, and conversations from the experts that I trust inside the community so that you can create more predictability in your diabetes management and feel empowered while doing so. Let's dive in. I love using SkinGrip because honestly it's the only patch company that I found that actually keeps my devices on while I'm doing things that I love, like weightlifting, running with my dogs, being really active and doing the things that I didn't think I could do before with diabetes. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Keep You 100 Radio. I'm so excited to be back on the podcast. We took a few weeks for a little bit of a break, but we are back and ready to go with everything that you need for your type 1 diabetes journey. So if you are new to the podcast, hello, my name is Lissy Pointer. I am a type 1 diabetic of a little over 9 years, and I am also a health coach and personal trainer for people living with type 1 diabetes. So if you're here, chances are you are looking for more resources and education for your diabetes journey, things to help you find more predictability without necessarily having to give up the things that you love. And if that sounds like you, then you are in the perfect place. So welcome. If you are not new here, then thank you for coming back. I always appreciate you hanging out with us on the podcast. Before we dive into the episode, I do want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor, SkinGrip. If you are not familiar with SkinGrip, you are missing out. I have been using SkinGrip for the past it has to be over 4 years now. They are the only patch company that I will use to keep on my diabetes devices. I use the Omnipod and the Dexcom G7. And let me just tell you, especially with summer coming up and all of these sports and activities that we do, it can just be really hard to keep our devices on, especially when you add in things like water and sweating and doorknobs, like just those random things that other people don't have to think about in their day-to-day, and people living with diabetes who use different technologies do. So I use SkinGrip to keep my devices on. It's an extra adhesive layer on top of your devices to make sure that they stay on strong and you do not have to worry about them falling off. So if you want to try SkinGrip, you can go ahead and grab an extra 10% off of your next purchase. You can go to the link try.skingrip.com/podcast and claim the discount there. So we are going to dive into today's episode, and like I mentioned, there's a lot of things with diabetes that maybe you don't have the best education on or resources on, and this is going to be one of those episodes where we're going to dive into a very specific area of diabetes management that's just not talked about inside of our endocrinologist office, and that is around exercise. Now, if you are somebody who was just diagnosed with diabetes, then chances are you are probably getting these like very cookie cutter pieces of advice that aren't necessarily helping you feel confident walking into your next workout. If you've been living with diabetes for a while, chances are you got those cookie cutter pieces of advice, you've tried them, and you feel just constantly defeated by your workouts. You want to do something that's good for your body, you want to feel strong, and instead you're either left with a low blood sugar, so you're left kind of sitting to the sidelines and having juice, and you feel like this is counterproductive for my time, or you end up with a high blood sugar, which again feels counterproductive because you want to use exercise as a tool for your blood sugars, and instead you're just experiencing more of a roller coaster of fluctuation. I know for sure I've had my fair share of those. So this episode is going to be all about kind of the one end of the spectrum, which is the high blood sugars. So we're going to go through 3 reasons why you may be experiencing high blood sugars after your workout and what you can do about it. So like I mentioned, I was diagnosed with diabetes 9 years ago, and before those 9 years, if you've listened to this podcast before, then you've probably heard a little bit about this before, but I was a gymnast for 10 years. I did competitive gymnastics 3 days a week for 3 hours. I did competitions on the weekend. I was just constantly doing activity, and I was always feeling strong. So after being diagnosed with something like type 1 diabetes, it felt very unnatural for me to go back into my workout routine, especially because at that point I was a freshman in college, 19 years old. That in itself, adding different activities back into your day, or just trying to get back into a routine in a period of life where like life looks different. Life, you're moving out on your own. You're, I was on campus, living in a dorm. Like life looks different, and then you add on a complexity like type 1 diabetes. It was just something that I felt really overwhelmed about. And no matter what I was walking into, whether I was walking across campus, just a big campus like Penn State, or I was walking into one of the classes at the gym, I did not feel confident enough walking into those moments. So the summer after my first semester being diagnosed at Penn State, I came home, and my best friend Taylor, who you heard on the other podcast that we did a few weeks ago, we started doing CrossFit together. And I loved this so much because it was just something for me to feel strong again in a body that for the past few months did not feel strong. So it felt really good to like lift weights. I loved the community at the gym that I was going to, and all around it was just a really great experience. However, on the other side of things, I was constantly having high blood sugars after those classes, and I never knew what to anticipate. I had been seeing people online saying that they would like dose before their class, but I didn't feel confident enough doing that, so I would just kind of let my blood sugars ride however they were going to ride, and I would just take a correction after my class. But it still left me feeling really, really frustrated because, again, it was something that I just wanted to do for the betterment of my blood sugars. I wanted to feel stronger in my body, but it just felt really counterintuitive. I wanted to use exercise as a tool to lower my A1C and feel healthier, but here I was ending up with a blood sugar of 250 or 300 after a workout class. So again, in this episode, I want to go and break down those 3 reasons why that might be happening. This is something that we actually did in our Q&A for Keep You 100 just a few weeks ago, and we took our members through a full audit of their own blood sugars during their own workouts and just showed them the different variables that were contributing to the results that they were seeing. So think of this episode a little bit like that. So we're going to dive into the first reason why you might be seeing a high blood sugar during or after your workout, and that comes down to this very important factor that is not talked about enough. From day one, I was kind of taught, hey, go into your workout, have a blood sugar of over 150. I believe that's about like 7.5 if you measure in millimoles. Go in with a blood sugar of over 150, take a juice box, and just, catch a low if it happens. Now, again, from the anecdote before, we know that not every workout leads to a low blood sugar. Sometimes they lead to a high blood sugar. So manipulating our blood sugar to be higher going into that workout can be pretty counterproductive. So then I started looking more into this, right? I started Googling and just wanting more answers. And everything that I found online was that simplification of weightlifting makes your blood sugars go up and cardio makes your blood sugars go down. Now, this is a little bit more on track, but it actually is not really inclusive to the full picture here. Because maybe you've experienced this. You go to the gym, you lift up a weight, and your blood sugar goes down. And you're thinking, what the heck? I've been reading that weightlifting makes my blood sugar go high. Then on the other end, you do cardio fully expecting your blood sugars to go low, and instead you end up with a high. Now, the missing variable that's not talked about enough here is the level of intensity that your body is working at. And this can either be what's driving your blood sugars higher, or this can be what's driving your blood sugars lower. So intensity doesn't come from just what type or category of workout you're doing. It comes from looking at how hard your body is working and what energy demand your body needs to keep up with. So there's a few ways that we can measure intensity. The first one being looking at our heart rate. So if you are somebody who wears something like an Apple Watch, like I'm wearing right now, maybe you wear a Fitbit, this is just one tool that you can use to measure your heart rate. And this is just going to be just one indicator of how hard your body is working. Now, keep in mind too, this is going to be a little bit different for everybody. It may not be the best indicator for you if you are somebody that has like a heart rate dysfunction. If you're taking beta blockers, anything like that, this probably won't be the best indicator of intensity for you. But if you're somebody who doesn't have that, this is something that you can take a look at. Now, we all have our own individual maximum heart rate. It's a little bit hard to gauge this as an exact number, but there are ways that we can get estimates for this number. And what that maximum heart rate indicates is just how many beats per minute can our heart rate get before kind of maxing out, before we have to stop that activity. I'm sure that you've been there before where you're doing an activity and you can only do that for 20 or 30 seconds before stopping. And that's because you're nearing your maximum heart rate and you have to get your heart rate back down so you can continue. So what are the ways that we can find our maximum heart rate? Well, again, as an estimate, we can take the number 220 and subtract our age to get that maximum heart rate. So for example, I am 28 years old, so I'm going to take the number 220 and subtract 28. And that's going to give me 192. That's going to be my estimated maximum heart rate. Now, you're probably wondering, where do we go from here? How does this contribute to how I know where my blood sugar will go? So when you have that number, you can then use that as a reference point for how hard your body is working at any given time. So if I were to look at my heart rate right now, it's at about, it's still measuring, but my last heart rate was 66 beats per minute. If I were to take that number over 192, it would be a very small percentage. But if you're doing your workout, and if I was doing my workout and my heart rate was at something like 170, I would take that number and divide it by 192 times 100 to get the percent, and I can gauge at what percentage of my maximum heart rate is my body working at right now. Now, how this correlates with our blood sugar is that generally the higher that percent, so once you near that like 80-90%, the more likely you are to see a rise in your blood sugar. Now, why is that? The more demand that our body needs to keep up with for our activity, the more energy it needs. And chances are at that intensity, your body isn't getting that energy from just something like oxygen. Oxygen gives your body energy during your activity. So it needs to pull from other places. So this is where you see things like the liver dump of glucose, and that's where we see a spike in our blood sugar because people with type 1 diabetes can't regulate that dump like people without type 1 diabetes. So hopefully things are connecting a little bit here, but just to reiterate, typically the higher the heart rate, the higher percentage of your maximum heart rate that you are working at, the more likely that you will see a spike in your blood sugar. Now, let's just say that you're somebody who doesn't have access to something like an Apple Watch and you still want to use your heart rate as an indicator of how high your intensity is, or you just want to measure intensity in general. You can still do this, and you're going to do this through something called the talk test. So the talk test is just you're not going to get a specific number from this, but it's another way to kind of indicate how hard your body is working. So the talk test is literally just as it sounds. You're talking, or you're thinking of how easy it would be to talk. So right now, I'm in the podcast studio. I'm sitting at a desk, and my body's not really doing much. It's sitting here, so I can talk through sentences. I can talk to you guys on this podcast. Now, how would that change if I was going for a walk with somebody, if I was actually moving my body? It would probably be pretty similar. You're still moving your body, your energy demand is a little bit higher, but you can still hold a conversation when you're going for a walk with your best friend or your partner. Now, I want you to step that up a notch. Let's say that you were running on a treadmill. How easy is it for you to hold a conversation then? Or how easy is it for you to say your ABCs then? Chances are you can probably still talk, but you're gonna have to huff and puff a little bit more. You're gonna need some extra breaths as you're moving through that conversation. Now, let's step it up another notch. Let's just say you're doing sprints, or you're doing something like CrossFit or high intensity interval training. I want you to think then, how easy is it for me to get through my ABCs right now? Chances are at that capacity, you are not talking, or maybe you're getting through one letter at a time after a few seconds. And pretty much from that gauge, we can anticipate that the less amount of words or the least likely that you are to hold a conversation, the higher intensity your body is working at and the higher amount of energy that your body needs to get through that workout. So you can kind of use that as your indicator of how easy is it for me to talk right now. At a super high intensity closer to your maximum heart rate, you're probably not saying many words at all. There's been a lot of workouts where I'm like, I am not talking because my energy needs to go to what my body is doing right now. So that's another way that you can kind of measure, okay, how hard is my body working? What intensity is this activity? So kind of to wrap up that first piece, first reason why you might be seeing a higher blood sugar after a workout is look at your intensity. So number 2, if you're finding that, my workout wasn't very high intensity, but I'm still experiencing a high blood sugar, you're going to want to pay attention to number 2, and that is digestion. So think about your meal time before your workout. Again, that whole narrative that we're given at diagnosis or even long after is, have a snack before your workout to make sure that your blood sugar is a little bit more elevated before your workout. And even without the blood sugar component, it's natural to think that that's something that we should do as well because you want to fuel your body with food before doing an activity. However, for people who are paying attention to their blood sugar, like us, this can add another complexity into it. So exercise actually slows down digestion during the activity, and that's because your body is focusing on getting the blood flow to your muscles, to your lungs, to the things that it needs to really prioritize that activity. So with that being said, digestion slows down. So let's just say you have a granola bar or a yogurt or something to keep your blood sugar elevated during your workout, and you're only eating that about 15 minutes before your workout. Chances are that hasn't completed digestion or digesting just yet. So what happens is during your workout, that digestion is slowing down, and what do we see? We finish our workout, that finishes digesting, and we see a high blood sugar after the workout. So if you're somebody who, has a pre-workout snack and you're starting to realize that that's a common trend, I would encourage you to just kind of push back that snack a little bit ahead of your workout. Maybe it's 45 minutes, an hour, and just see if that changes the outcome of your workout. This doesn't mean to completely avoid eating. Some people have a lot of luck going into their workout fasted because it just mitigates the insulin on board. I'm not somebody who enjoys that because then I feel like just a little bit more depleted. I need some fuel, but it just may be helpful to say, okay, let me space this out a little bit more so that I'm not seeing that delayed spike in my blood sugar. Now, we are going to go into the third reason why you might be seeing your blood sugar rise during or after your during or after your workout. And this has everything to do with the insulin that you're taking before your workout, or how you are manipulating your insulin before or during your workout. Now, number 1 that we want to pay attention to is our insulin on board. If you, again, are having a snack or having a meal before your workout and you are taking that insulin within an hour, let's just say, of your workout, we just want to be mindful of that bolus because, again, if we look at our peak timing of insulin, typically that's between 1 to 2 hours of when we took that bolus. So that's where people see low blood sugars. Now, where we usually see the high blood sugars come in is almost the opposite. We have, my endo has personally told me, shut off your pump, do a temp basal during your workout, and just kind of let that carry your blood sugars a little bit higher. And we see that a lot with the automated pumps as well, of when you go in activity mode, or maybe your pump just sees that your blood sugar is lowering a little bit, it will shut off your pump, and it may do that an hour or so at a time. Now, the issue with that is that the temp basal or the suspension that you are giving yourself in that moment is not affecting you in that moment. So again, when we look at the timing of insulin, we want to look at what is this doing for my blood sugars a half an hour from now or an hour from now? Because that's when it's truly going to impact your blood sugars. So instead of thinking about setting a temp basal for during your workout, let's think about setting it for ahead of your workout. So this is where I would set a temp basal or go into activity mode at least about an hour before I'm actually set to do that activity. So an example here that I've done in my own personal life, last March, just a little over a year ago, my fiance and I did a 3-week road trip across the US. And with that, we were at 8 to 9 different national parks. So we went to the Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce Canyon, all of them. And with these, we did a lot of different hikes. So what I would do before a big hike is I would actually wake up about 2 hours before the hike and set my temp basal then. And I was pretty conservative with it. Instead of doing like a complete basal shut off, I would do maybe like 80% or 70% depending on how long that hike was. And I would let that temp basal work its magic before the hike actually started, so that during my hike, that's when the temp basal was actually impacting my blood sugars, and that's when I saw the impact from it. So again, like if you are somebody who utilizes this tool as something to help your blood sugar stay steady, I would recommend, or something to consider and talk to your endo about, would be setting this temp basal ahead of time so that it can impact you actually during your workout. So again, something that happens is we set that temp basal during the workout, and we're not seeing it impact us until right after the workout, and that's when we see the high blood sugar come up. At that point, we're like, what the heck? So again, just to reiterate those 3 things to pay attention to that may be causing a high blood sugar during or after your workout. Number 1, I have to remember this. Number 1, the intensity of your workout. Number 2, the meal or slowing down of digestion of your previous meal during your workout. And 3, that bolus reduction or basal reduction that you are doing before your workout for on your insulin pump. So hopefully this was helpful in kind of navigating your workouts. Let me know if you want to hear the 3 things to pay attention to if you're experiencing low blood sugars during your workout. I know that is very common as well. And just all around, would love to hear a review on the podcast. So if you are listening to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave a 5-star review and let us know what you think, and take a screenshot of you listening to this and tag me on Instagram at needlesandSpoons_. Thank you so much for tuning in.